The lawyer's briefcase hit my kitchen table with a thud that seemed to echo through 43 years of mortgage payments. My daughter Sarah sat across from me, her manicured fingers drumming against the mahogany surface I'd refinished myself back when she was learning to walk on these same hardwood floors. "Dad, this is Mr. Henderson from Peterson, Walsh & Associates," she said, not meeting my eyes. The lawyer was younger than my reading glasses, probably fresh out of some fancy law school where they taught him how to separate old men from their dignity. He wore one of those expensive suits that cost more than I used to make in a month at the plant. "Mr. Garrett," Henderson began, sliding a stack of papers toward me with the practiced efficiency of a funeral director, "we're here today because your daughter has some very legitimate concerns about your ability to continue living independently." I looked at Sarah, really looked at her, searching for the little girl who used to sit on my lap while I read her bedtime stories. Instead, I found a 42-year-old woman in a power suit who wouldn't even glance in my direction. Her blonde hair was pulled back in that severe style she'd adopted since her divorce, and her mouth was set in the same determined line I'd seen when she was 16 and demanding the car keys. "Is that so?" I kept my voice steady, the way I'd learned to do during 30 years as a foreman at Mitchell Steel. Never let them see you rattled, even when the whole operation's going to hell. "And what exactly makes you think I can't take care of myself in my own house?" Henderson opened his briefcase with theatrical precision. "We have documentation of several concerning incidents. The fire department was called here 3 weeks ago due to smoke from an unattended stove. Your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, has filed a report about finding you confused and disoriented in your backyard at 2 in the morning. And there's the matter of unpaid bills and—" "Stop right there." I held up my hand, feeling heat rise in my chest like steam in an old radiator. The smoke was from bacon grease. I was cooking breakfast, stepped outside to get the paper, and got distracted talking to Patterson about her damn cat digging up my tomatoes. As for being confused and disoriented, I was looking for that same cat because it was howling like a banshee and keeping the whole neighborhood awake. Sarah finally looked at me, and I saw something that hurt worse than the arthritis in my knees. Pity. "Dad, you left the stove on for 3 hours. Mrs. Patterson said you didn't even recognize her at first." "I recognized her just fine. I told her I was looking for her cat, and she started treating me like I'd lost my mind just because I was wearing my pajamas. It was my own backyard, for Christ's sake." Henderson cleared his throat, consulting his papers like they were biblical scripture. "Mr. Garrett, there's also the incident with the utility company. Your electricity was nearly shut off due to non-payment, despite having adequate funds in your checking account. That one stung because it was true. I'd gotten behind on a few bills, but not because I couldn't pay them. The truth was, I'd been putting off dealing with anything that required calling those automated phone systems or navigating websites that seemed designed by teenagers on crystal meth. When did paying a simple electric bill become harder than operating heavy machinery?" "I paid the bill," I said.
"After receiving a final notice,"
Sarah added quietly. "I paid it." Henderson leaned forward, probably thinking he'd found his opening. "Mr. Garrett, your daughter loves you very much. She's identified an excellent assisted living facility called Sunset Manor. It has all the amenities." Assisted living. I tasted the words like they were spoiled milk. "You mean an old folks' home?"
"The terminology."
"I know what you're calling it, and I know what it is." I stood up from my chair, my back protesting the sudden movement. At 71, I wasn't the 6'2" tower I used to be, but I still had presence. "You're talking about warehousing me with a bunch of other inconvenient old people so my daughter can sleep better at night."
"That's not fair, Dad."
Sarah's voice cracked slightly, showing the first sign of emotion since she'd walked into my kitchen with her hired gun.
"I'm worried about you. Mom's been gone 2 years, and you're rattling around in this big house all by yourself. What if you fall down those stairs? What if you have another episode like the one with Mrs. Patterson?"
"Episode?" I shook my head, looking around the kitchen where I'd eaten breakfast every morning since Jimmy Carter was president. The coffee maker was the same one Margaret and I had gotten for our 20th anniversary. The refrigerator was covered with grandchildren's drawings held up by magnets from family vacations to places like Myrtle Beach and the Wisconsin Bells. This wasn't just a house. It was the archive of my entire adult life. Sarah, honey, I know you think you're doing what's best for me, but I'm not ready to be put out to pasture. I can still drive, I can still think, I can still take care of myself. Henderson interrupted with the sensitivity of a tax auditor. Mr. Garrett, the facility has a beautiful dining room, organized activities, medical staff on site 24 hours a day. Many residents find it quite liberating not to have to worry about home maintenance, cooking, cleaning. Liberating. I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. You know what I call a place where other people decide when you eat, what you do, and who you spend time with? Prison. A comfortable prison maybe, but still prison. Sarah stood up too, her chair scraping against the floor. Dad, please, just look at the brochures. Maybe visit the place. You might actually like it. No. No what? No, I'm not going to look at brochures. No, I'm not going to visit.
And no, I'm sure as hell not going to let you and this kid in a suit railroad me into some old people's warehouse because I forgot to pay my electric bill on time. Henderson exchanged a glance with Sarah, and I caught it. They'd expected this. They'd planned for my resistance like generals planning a siege. Mr. Garrett, Henderson said, his voice taking on that patient tone people use with children and mental patients. I'm afraid your daughter has already begun the legal process to establish guardianship. We have medical evaluations, testimony from concerned neighbors, documentation of financial mismanagement. Guardianship? The word hit me like a punch to the solar plexus. You're trying to have me declared incompetent? Sarah's face was red now, tears starting to form in her eyes. Dad, it's not about incompetence. It's about safety. It's about making sure you're taken care of. By taking away my right to make my own decisions? You're not making good decisions. The words burst out of her like she'd been holding them back for months. You're living on frozen dinners and cereal. You haven't been to the doctor in over a year. You're letting the house fall apart around you. And yesterday I found you trying to mow the lawn in December, Dad. In December. That stopped me cold. I remembered going out to the garage yesterday, but I'd been looking for my snow shovel, hadn't I? The memory felt slippery, like trying to hold on to soap with wet hands. I was getting the snow shovel, I said, but my voice sounded uncertain even to me. You were pulling the lawnmower out of the garage and telling Mrs. Patterson the grass was getting too long. The silence in the kitchen was thick enough to cut with a knife. I could hear the old house settling around us, the furnace kicking on in the basement, the refrigerator humming its familiar tune. These were the sounds of my life, the soundtrack to 4 decades of marriage, child-rearing, and the simple daily business of being alive. Henderson sensed weakness like a shark smelling blood. Mr. Garrett, the guardianship hearing is scheduled for next Friday. Of course, you have the right to legal representation, but I should warn you that fighting this process can be expensive and emotionally draining for everyone involved. Are you threatening me? I'm simply explaining the reality of the situation. Your daughter has done her homework. She has documentation, witness statements, professional evaluations. Fighting this will likely only delay the inevitable and create additional stress for your family. I looked at Sarah again, trying to find some trace of the little girl who used to defend me when her mother said I was being too stubborn. Her tears were flowing freely now. Dad, I don't know. Maybe you're not losing your mind, but you're not the same man you were when Mom was alive. You're lost. And I'm scared that one day I'm going to get a phone call that something terrible happened to you, and I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I could have prevented it. The thing about getting old is that you start second-guessing yourself about things you've always been sure of. For 71 years, I'd trusted my own judgment, my own perceptions, my own ability to navigate the world. But now, with my daughter's tears and a lawyer's documents spread across my kitchen table, I felt that foundation starting to crack. Had I really tried to mow the lawn in December? The more I thought about it, the hazier the memory became. I remembered going to the garage, but why? For the shovel? For the lawnmower? The uncertainty was terrifying in a way I hadn't experienced since I was a child afraid of the dark. "I need to think about this," I said finally. Henderson began gathering his papers with the efficiency of a man who'd had this conversation before. "Of course, Mr. Garrett, but please understand that the hearing date is fixed. If you choose to contest the guardianship petition, you'll need to secure legal representation quickly." After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the empty coffee cups and the lingering smell of Henderson's expensive cologne. The house felt different somehow, like it was already saying goodbye to me. I walked through the rooms, touching familiar objects, trying to anchor myself in the reality of my own life. In the living room, I stopped at the mantelpiece where Margaret's picture smiled at me from between our wedding photo and Sarah's high school graduation portrait. Margaret had been gone 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days, but I still found myself looking to her chair during the evening news, still setting out 2 coffee cups in the morning before remembering I was alone. "What do you think, Maggie?" I asked her picture. "Am I losing it?" But Margaret wasn't there to answer, and for the first time since her funeral, I felt the full weight of that absence. The next morning, I called my old friend Jerry Kowalski. Jerry and I had worked together at the plant for 28 years before he retired and opened a small law practice handling wills, divorces, and other small-town legal matters. If anyone would shoot straight with me, it would be Jerry. "Jesus Christ, Frank," he said when I explained the situation. "Seems like it. You ever handle anything like this?" "A few times. Usually it's adult children trying to get control of a parent's finances or somebody trying to protect an elderly relative from being taken advantage of. But Frank, I gotta ask, are you having problems? Memory issues, confusion, anything like that?" I told him about the lawnmower incident, the electric bill, the night in the backyard. As I spoke, I could hear how it sounded from the outside, and I didn't like what I heard. "Look," Jerry said after a long pause, "it could be nothing. Grief does funny things to people, and you've been through hell these past 2 years. But it could also be the beginning of something more serious. Have you seen a doctor? You sound like Sarah. Maybe Sarah's got a point. When's the last time you had a physical?" I couldn't remember, which was probably answer enough. "Here's what we're going to do," Jerry continued. "First, you're going to see Doc Morrison this week. Get a complete workup, cognitive tests, the whole 9 yards. If there's nothing wrong with you medically, we've got ammunition to fight the guardianship petition. If there is something wrong, we need to know about it so we can deal with it on our terms, not theirs. And if I am losing my mind, then we figure out how to handle it with dignity. But Frank, even if you are having some cognitive issues, that doesn't automatically mean you need to be locked up in some facility. There are other options, other ways to get help while staying in your own home." That afternoon, I made an appointment with Dr. Morrison for Thursday, the day before the hearing. I also did something I'd been avoiding for months. I walked through my house with honest eyes, looking for signs of the decline Sarah had described. The truth was uncomfortable. The bathroom upstairs had a loose floorboard I'd been meaning to fix for months. The gutters were full of leaves from autumn. Bills were scattered across my desk in the den, some opened, some not. The refrigerator contained leftover Chinese food from God knows when, along with milk that was probably older than Henderson's law degree. But the house wasn't falling down. I wasn't living in squalor. I was just untidy, maybe a little overwhelmed by the details of daily life that Margaret had always handled. That wasn't the same as being incompetent, was it? Wednesday evening, I was sitting on the front porch watching the sunset when Mrs. Patterson came over. Eleanor Patterson was 73, a widow herself, and had lived next door for 15 years. She was carrying a casserole dish and wearing the expression of someone preparing to deliver bad news. "Frank, I need to talk to you about something, and I'm not sure how to say it. If it's about me testifying at your daughter's hearing, you can save your breath. I already told that lawyer what I saw." I set my beer down on the porch railing. "What exactly did you tell him, Ellie?" She sat down in the chair Margaret used to occupy during our evening porch sessions. "The truth, Frank. That night 2 weeks ago, you came out in your pajamas asking about Whiskers. But honey, you called me Margaret 3 times. And when I tried to tell you I was Eleanor, you got confused and asked me why I was in Margaret's nightgown." The words hit me like cold water. I had no memory of calling her Margaret, no memory of being confused about who she was. But looking at Eleanor's face, I could see she wasn't lying. "I was half asleep," I said weakly. "Frank, you were wide awake. You were coherent about everything else. You knew about my cat. You knew about the noise. You thought I was your wife." We sat in silence for a while, watching the neighbor kids play basketball in their driveway. Normal life continuing around us, while mine seemed to be unraveling. "Are you going to testify against me?" I asked. Eleanor sighed. "I'm going to tell the truth. But Frank, maybe Sarah's right. Maybe it's time to consider getting some help." Thursday morning, I drove myself to Dr. Morrison's office, taking extra care to signal properly and stay within the speed limit. The waiting room was full of people my age and older, all of us trying to maintain the fiction that we were still the people we used to be. Dr. Morrison had been my physician for 12 years, a straight-talking man in his 50s who didn't sugarcoat bad news. The examination was thorough and humiliating. Blood tests, urine tests, cognitive assessments that made me feel like a lab rat running through a maze. "Frank," he said when we were finished, "I'm going to be honest with you. Your physical health is remarkably good for a man your age. Your heart is strong, your blood pressure is well controlled, and you're not showing signs of any major systemic illness. But you are showing some signs of mild cognitive impairment. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would prevent you from living independently with some support, but there are definite changes from your baseline." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What kind of changes? Short-term memory issues, occasional disorientation, some difficulty with complex problem-solving tasks. It could be related to grief and depression, or it could be the early stages of dementia. We won't know for sure without more extensive testing and observation over time. How much time? Could be months, could be years. These things progress differently in different people. But Frank, the important thing is that this doesn't mean your life is over. It doesn't mean you can't make your own decisions. It just means you might need some help with the day-to-day stuff. I drove home in a daze, Morrison's words echoing in my head. Mild cognitive impairment. Early stages of dementia. The medical terminology made it sound clinical, manageable, but what it really meant was that my brain, the thing I'd relied on for 7 decades to navigate the world, was starting to fail me. That evening, Jerry came over to discuss our strategy for the hearing. I showed him Morrison's report, watching his expression grow more serious as he read. "This doesn't help us," he said finally. "I know. But it doesn't destroy us either. Morrison says you're competent to make your own decisions with support. The question is, what kind of support do you want?" We spent 2 hours going over options. Home health aides, meal delivery services, family involvement, regular medical monitoring. It was possible to construct a support system that would keep me in my own house while addressing Sarah's concerns. The problem, Jerry warned, is that Sarah and her lawyer are going to argue that you can't be trusted to follow through on any support plan. They'll say you're too proud, too stubborn, too set in your ways to accept help. They're probably right. Are they? I thought about it. Was I too proud to accept help? Too stubborn to admit I needed support? The honest answer was probably yes. I'd been the provider, the decision-maker, the one everyone else relied on. The idea of being dependent on others, even my own daughter, felt like a fundamental violation of who I was supposed to be as a man, as a father, as Frank Garrett. What if I could prove them wrong? I asked. How? What if I already had help in place? What if I could show the judge that I've taken concrete steps to address the problems without giving up my independence? Jerry looked skeptical. What kind of steps? Give me tonight to think about it. Friday morning dawned gray and cold, typical December weather in Ohio. I put on my best suit, the same one I'd worn to Margaret's funeral, and drove to the courthouse with Jerry. The hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock in Judge Patricia Hendricks' courtroom. Sarah was already there, with Henderson and another lawyer I didn't recognize, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s. They were huddled around a table covered with documents, looking like they were preparing for war. "Who's the new lawyer?" I asked Jerry. "Cynthia Walsh. She's the senior partner at Henderson's firm. Specializes in elder law. They're bringing out the big guns." Judge Hendricks was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen every kind of family drama the legal system could produce. She called the hearing to order with brisk efficiency. Walsh stood to present Sarah's case, and I had to admit she was impressive. She painted a picture of a declining elderly man who posed a danger to himself and others, using the incidents Sarah had documented to build a narrative of inevitable deterioration. "Your Honor, Mr. Garrett is a proud man who has had difficulty accepting that he needs help. His daughter, Miss Collins, has tried repeatedly to discuss these issues with him, but he has consistently refused to acknowledge the reality of his situation. We have medical documentation of cognitive decline, witness testimony regarding concerning behavior, and evidence of his inability to manage basic daily tasks." She presented Eleanor Patterson's statement, along with testimony from the fire department about the stove incident and documentation from the utility company about the unpaid bills. It was damaging, systematic, and professionally presented. When it was Jerry's turn, he stood slowly, looking every bit the small-town lawyer going up against the big city firm. But I'd seen Jerry in action before, and I knew better than to underestimate him. "Your Honor, my client is not contesting the fact that he's experienced some difficulties since his wife's death 2 years ago. Grief affects people in different ways, and Mr. Garrett has struggled with the adjustment to living alone after 41 years of marriage." Jerry presented Morrison's medical report, emphasizing the doctor's conclusion that I was competent to make my own decisions with appropriate support. The question before this court is not whether Mr. Garrett needs help, but whether he needs to be stripped of his fundamental right to self-determination. The petitioners would have you believe that the only solution to Mr. Garrett's challenges is institutional care under full guardianship. We respectfully disagree. Then, Jerry did something that surprised everyone in the courtroom, including me. "Your Honor, I'd like to call Mr. Garrett to testify on his own behalf." I walked to the witness stand on unsteady legs, acutely aware that this might be the most important testimony I'd ever give. Judge Hendricks administered the oath, and I swore to tell the truth, knowing that the truth was more complicated than either side wanted to admit. Jerry began with basic questions: my name, address, family situation, medical history. Then he moved to the incidents Sarah's lawyers had cited. "Mr. Garrett, can you tell the court about the night Mrs. Patterson found you in your backyard?" I took a deep breath. I was looking for her cat. It was making noise, keeping me awake. I went outside to find it, but I was confused about what time it was and who Mrs. Patterson was when she came out to see what was going on. "Do you remember calling her Margaret?" "No, sir, I don't remember that. But Mrs. Patterson is an honest woman, and if she says that's what happened, then I believe her." "How do you feel about not remembering that incident?" "Scared," I said honestly. "It scares me that my mind might be playing tricks on me." Jerry nodded. "What about the incident with the lawnmower?"
I thought I was getting my snow shovel, but apparently I was getting the lawnmower instead. I don't remember thinking the grass needed cutting in December, but my daughter says that's what I told Mrs. Patterson. Are you concerned about these memory issues? Yes, sir. Concerned enough that I saw Dr. Morrison for a complete evaluation. Concerned enough that I've made some changes. This was the moment Jerry and I had planned for. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Your Honor, I'd like to enter this document into evidence. Judge Hendricks examined the paper with raised eyebrows. Mr. Kowalski, what exactly am I looking at? A contract, Your Honor, between Mr. Garrett and Caring Companions Home Services.
The courtroom stirred. Sarah leaned forward in her chair, whispering urgently to her lawyers. Walsh stood up. Objection, Your Honor. This appears to be a last-minute attempt to influence the court. We haven't had an opportunity to examine this document or verify its authenticity. Overruled, Judge Hendricks said. Mr. Kowalski, please explain. Jerry approached the bench with copies for everyone. Your Honor, yesterday afternoon, Mr. Garrett contracted with a licensed home health service to provide daily assistance with meal preparation, housekeeping, medication management, and general companionship. The service begins Monday morning and includes weekly visits from a registered nurse for health monitoring. I watched Sarah's face as she read the contract. Her expression went from surprise to confusion to something that might have been hope. Furthermore, Jerry continued, Mr. Garrett has arranged for automatic bill payment for all his utilities and has signed a limited power of attorney giving his daughter access to his financial accounts for monitoring purposes only. Walsh was on her feet again. Your Honor, these are clearly last-minute arrangements designed to circumvent the legitimate concerns that brought us here today. There's no guarantee Mr. Garrett will follow through on these commitments. Judge Hendricks looked at me over her reading glasses. Mr. Garrett, why should this court believe you'll stick to these arrangements? I stood up in the witness box, feeling the weight of everyone's expectations. Your Honor, I won't lie to you. I don't want to need help. I don't want to admit that I can't take care of myself the way I always have. But I'm more afraid of losing my home and my independence than I am of accepting help. I looked directly at Sarah for the first time since the hearing began. I'm sorry I've been stubborn. I'm sorry I scared you. But I'm not ready to give up yet. If you'll let me try this way, I promise I'll follow through. And if it doesn't work, if I can't manage even with help, then we can revisit the question of other arrangements. The courtroom was quiet, except for the sound of the court reporter's keyboard and the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Judge Hendricks studied the documents in front of her for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, she looked up. This is a difficult case because it involves balancing Mr. Garrett's right to autonomy against legitimate concerns for his safety and welfare. The evidence clearly shows that Mr. Garrett has experienced some cognitive decline and has had difficulty managing certain aspects of independent living. My heart sank. She was going to rule against me. However, she continued, the medical evidence does not support a finding of complete incompetence. Dr. Morrison's report indicates that Ms. Garrett retains the capacity to make informed decisions about his care, and the support plan he has outlined addresses many of the concerns raised by the petitioners. Walsh started to object, but Judge Hendricks held up her hand. I'm going to deny the petition for guardianship at this time. However, I'm also going to order a 6-month review period. Mr. Garrett, you will comply with all aspects of your support plan. You will submit to monthly medical evaluations, and you will allow your daughter reasonable access to monitor your well-being. If there are any significant incidents during this period, or if you fail to comply with these conditions, the court will reconsider the guardianship petition. The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. As people began filing out of the courtroom, Sarah walked over to where Jerry and I were gathering our papers. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying anymore. Dad, I want you to know that I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because I love you. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her.
and saw not the adversary who'd tried to have me declared incompetent, but a frightened woman who'd already lost her mother and was terrified of losing her father too. I know, sweetheart, and I love you too. That's why I'm going to make this work. She nodded, glancing at the contract in my hand. Caring Companions is a good service. My friend Lisa used them for her mother. They're professional, reliable. You knew about them? Dad, I've been researching options for months. I just wanted you to let me help you find the right solution instead of fighting me every step of the way. We hugged there in the courthouse hallway, and for the first time in months, I felt like we might be able to find our way back to being father and daughter instead of adversaries. The next Monday morning, Maria Santos knocked on my door at 8 o'clock sharp. She was a compact woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the efficient manner of someone who'd been taking care of other people's fathers for a long time. "Mr. Garrett, I'm Maria from Caring Companions. Are you ready to get started?" I wasn't ready, not really. Everything in me rebelled against the idea of having a stranger in my house, making my meals, organizing my life. But I thought about Judge Hendrick's warning and Sarah's fears, and I opened the door. "Come on in, Maria. Coffee? That would be nice. Do you mind if I look around a bit, get familiar with the layout?" I followed her through my house, seeing it through her eyes. She didn't comment on the stack of bills on the kitchen counter or the dust on the living room furniture, but I could see her making mental notes. "This is a beautiful home," she said finally. "How long have you lived here?" 43 years. Bought it when Sarah was 2. It must hold a lot of memories. Every room. Maria nodded like she understood. "Mr. Garrett, I want you to know that I'm not here to take over your life.
I'm here to help you stay in control of it. Well, do things your way as much as possible, but I might make suggestions about things that could be easier or safer. Is that okay?" Over the next few weeks, Maria and I developed a routine. She came Monday through Friday, 8 to noon, helping with housework, meal planning, and the kind of organizational tasks that had become overwhelming since Margaret died. She also became something I hadn't expected, a friend. Maria had been born in El Salvador and immigrated to Ohio with her husband 30 years ago. Her children were grown, scattered across the country pursuing their own dreams, and she understood the particular loneliness of an empty nest combined with advanced age. "My husband died 3 years ago," she told me one morning while we were sorting through old photographs I'd been meaning to organize. "Heart attack at 68. One day he was fixing the fence in our backyard. The next day, he was gone. How do you handle it? The loneliness? Some days better than others. But I learned that staying busy helps, taking care of other people helps, and accepting help when you need it helps too." She paused, holding up a photo of Margaret and me from our 25th anniversary cruise. "Your wife was beautiful. She was everything. I don't know how to be without her." You don't have to know. You just have to keep trying, one day at a time. The routine was working better than I'd expected. Having Maria there forced me to maintain basic standards. I couldn't stay in my pajamas all day or live on cereal and frozen dinners when someone was there to help prepare real meals. The house was cleaner and more organized than it had been in years. But more importantly, having a regular schedule and another person to interact with seemed to help with the confusion and memory problems I'd been experiencing. It was like having an anchor in the present moment, someone to remind me what day it was and what needed to be done. 6 weeks into our arrangement, Sarah came for dinner on a Sunday evening. It was the first time she'd been to the house for a social visit since Margaret's funeral. "Dad, the place looks great," she said, running her hand along the dining room table that was now regularly polished instead of buried under mail and newspapers. "Maria's a good housekeeper. It's more than that. You look better, more like yourself." We ate pot roast. Maria had prepared it on Friday and left detailed reheating instructions, and talked about Sarah's job, her kids, normal family conversation that didn't revolve around my competence or lack thereof. "Dad, I owe you an apology," she said over dessert. "For what?" "For going behind your back with the guardianship thing. I should have talked to you first, should have tried to work with you to find a solution instead of trying to impose one." I set down my coffee cup, considering my words carefully.
Sarah, you were scared. You saw your old man falling apart, and you didn't know what else to do. I can't fault you for that. But I could have handled it better. Maybe, but we figured it out, didn't we? She smiled for the first time in months. We did. How are you doing with Maria? Really? Honestly, I was terrified she was going to try to run my life, treat me like a child. But she's not like that. She helps me do things instead of doing them for me. There's a difference. Are you taking your medications regularly? Every morning at 8:30. Maria has them organized in one of those pill dispensers, and she checks with me to make sure I'm taking them correctly. And the doctor visits? Monthly checkups with Morrison, like the judge ordered. Last week, he said my blood pressure was the best it's been in years, probably because I'm eating regular meals and not living on stress and frozen food. We talked until almost 10 o'clock, later than I'd stayed up in months. After Sarah left, I sat on the porch despite the December cold, thinking about how much had changed in just 6 weeks. The truth was, I was still scared. Scared about what was happening to my mind. Scared about what the future held. Scared about eventually becoming the kind of burden on my family that my own father had been. But for the first time since Margaret died, I felt like I had some measure of control over my circumstances. 3 months later, I had my review hearing with Judge Hendricks. Dr. Morrison's latest evaluation showed continued mild cognitive impairment, but no significant decline. Maria provided a detailed report on my daily functioning, noting improvements in medication compliance, nutrition, and general self-care. Most importantly, there had been no incidents. No confused wandering in the backyard, no forgotten stove burners, no unpaid bills. Mr. Garrett, Judge Hendricks said, I'm impressed with your progress. The support system you've put in place appears to be working well. How do you feel about continuing with these arrangements? Your Honor, I'd like to continue indefinitely. I've learned that accepting help doesn't mean giving up my independence. It means being smart enough to know when I need support. The judge smiled. The court will close this matter. No further review hearings will be required unless circumstances change significantly. After the hearing, Sarah and I went to lunch at the diner where I'd been eating breakfast on Saturdays for 20 years. The waitress, Betty, had known me since before Sarah graduated from high school. Frank, good to see you, she said, pouring coffee without being asked. You're looking good. That nice lady who comes to help you was in here last week talking about how well you're doing. Maria talks about me? Says you're one of her favorite clients. Independent, but not stubborn about accepting help when you need it. That's a rare combination in men your age. Sarah laughed. He's learning. After lunch, we drove past Sunset Manor, the assisted living facility Henderson had wanted me to tour. It was a sprawling complex of modern buildings with manicured landscaping and a sign advertising gracious living for active seniors. I could see residents walking on paved paths, sitting in organized garden areas, participating in what looked like group activities. It doesn't look terrible, I admitted. It's actually quite nice, Sarah said. I toured it before the hearing. The people seem happy, the facilities are excellent, and they have a lot of programs to keep residents engaged. But it's not home. I understand that now. I was so focused on keeping you safe that I forgot about keeping you happy. We drove in comfortable silence for a while, past the neighborhoods where Sarah had grown up, past the elementary school where she'd learned to read, past the high school where she'd graduated as valedictorian. These were the landmarks of our shared history, the geography of our family story. Dad, can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy? I mean, really happy? Not just managing. I thought about it. Happiness seemed like a complicated concept for a 71-year-old widower with mild cognitive impairment. But there were moments. Sitting on the porch with my morning coffee while Maria bustled around the kitchen, working in the garden on spring afternoons, having dinner with Sarah and the grandkids, when I felt something that might be called contentment. I'm not the same happy I was when your mother was alive, I said finally. That kind of happiness is gone forever. But I'm finding a different kind of happiness, a quieter kind, maybe, but real. That's all I wanted, for you to be okay. I'm okay, sweetheart. We're okay. 6 months after the hearing, Maria and I had settled into a rhythm that felt natural rather than imposed. She still came Monday through Friday, but her role had evolved from caregiver to something more like a partner in the business of maintaining my independence. We'd developed projects together, organizing 40 years of family photographs into albums, updating the house's electrical system room by room, planning a vegetable garden for spring. Having goals and tasks gave structure to my days and kept my mind engaged in ways that sitting around feeling sorry for myself never could. "Mr. Garrett," Maria said one morning while we were sorting through boxes in the basement, "I have something to tell you." My heart sank. People my age learn to brace for bad news whenever someone starts a conversation that way. "My daughter in Phoenix is having a baby, my first grandchild. She's asked me to come help her for a month after the birth." "When?" "Next month. I know it's not ideal timing, but—" "Maria, of course you have to go. Family comes first." "I've arranged for a temporary replacement, Ana Rodriguez. She's also with Caring Companions, very experienced, excellent references." The prospect of adjusting to a new caregiver after 6 months of building trust and routine with Maria was daunting, but I understood family obligations better than most people. "Will you come back?" "If you'll have me. Phoenix is beautiful, but Ohio is home now. My friends are here, my church, my work." "My routine, you mean?" She laughed. "Your routine, too." Ana Rodriguez turned out to be Maria's opposite in almost every way. Tall where Maria was compact, quiet where Maria was chatty, methodical where Maria was intuitive. But she was professional and kind, and she worked hard to maintain the systems Maria and I had developed. During Maria's absence, I had what Dr. Morrison would later call an episode. I woke up one Tuesday morning completely disoriented, unable to remember what day it was or why there was a stranger in my kitchen. For about 10 minutes, I was convinced that Ana was a burglar and nearly called the police before she was able to calm me down and help me reorient myself. It was terrifying, not just the confusion itself, but the reminder of how fragile my grip on reality could be. Ana handled it with professional calm, but I could see the concern in her eyes as she called Dr. Morrison to report the incident. "These things happen," Morrison told me at my next appointment. "The progression isn't always steady. You might have good months followed by difficult days, or vice versa. The important thing is that you recognized what was happening and accepted help to get through it." "Is it going to get worse?" "Probably, eventually. But we can't predict how fast or how severe the progression will be. Some people plateau for years, others decline more rapidly. We'll monitor you closely and adjust your support level as needed." When Maria returned from Phoenix, glowing with grandmotherly pride and armed with dozens of baby pictures, I told her about the episode with Ana. "How do you feel about it now?" she asked. "Embarrassed, scared, but also grateful that Ana was there to help me through it." "That's why we're here, Mr. Garrett, not just for the good days, but especially for the difficult ones." "Did I ever tell you that you probably saved my life?" "How do you figure that?" "If Sarah had succeeded in getting guardianship, if I'd been forced into that facility, I think I would have given up, just stopped trying. But having you here, having help that lets me stay in my own home, it gives me a reason to keep fighting." Maria smiled, but her eyes were serious. "Mr. Garrett, I need you to understand something. What we're doing here, this arrangement, it's not a permanent solution. Someday, your needs might exceed what we can provide in a home setting. When that day comes, it won't mean we failed. It will just mean the situation changed." "I know, but not today." "No, not today." A year after the guardianship hearing, Sarah brought the grandkids over for my 72nd birthday. Emma was 14 now, tall and serious like her mother, while Jake was 11 and still young enough to think his grandfather was moderately cool. "Grandpa, Mom says you have someone who helps you now,"
Emma said while we were sitting on the porch after dinner. I do. Her name is Maria. She helps me keep the house clean and remember to take my medicine. Are you sick? Not sick exactly, just getting old. Sometimes my brain doesn't work as well as it used to. Jake looked up from the handheld video game he'd been absorbed in. Like how? Sometimes I forget things. Sometimes I get confused about what day it is or where I put something. It's not dangerous, but it can be frustrating. Do you forget about us? Emma asked with the directness that only teenagers can manage. No, sweetheart. I might forget where I put my car keys or what I had for breakfast, but I never forget the important things. I never forget how much I love you. Later, after the kids had gone home and I was cleaning up the wrapping paper from my gifts, I found myself thinking about the conversation. What was true? What did I never forget? I forgot practical things, appointments, errands, where I'd set down my reading glasses. I sometimes forgot recent conversations or repeated myself without realizing it. But I never forgot Margaret's smile, or the sound of Sarah's laugh, or the way Jake's face lit up when he scored a goal in soccer. The important things, the things that made life worth living, those seemed to be stored in a different part of my brain, protected somehow from whatever was slowly eroding my short-term memory and executive function. 2 years after the hearing, I had another crisis, more serious than the first. I fell down the basement stairs while doing laundry, not because I was confused or disoriented, but because I missed a step in the dim light. Maria found me unconscious at the bottom of the stairs when she arrived for work. I woke up in the hospital with a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and a daughter who looked like she'd aged 5 years in the 8 hours since my accident. Dad, you scared me to death. I'm okay, just clumsy. But we both knew it was more than clumsiness. At 73, falls weren't just accidents. They were harbingers of decline, previews of coming limitations. Dr. Morrison was blunt during his bedside consultation. Frank, you can't continue living alone, even with Maria's help during the day. What if this had happened at night or on the weekend? You could have laid there for hours, maybe died. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. Dad, maybe it's time to reconsider some other living arrangements. The words hung in the air like smoke from an old cigarette. After 2 years of successfully maintaining my independence, the question was back on the table. What are you thinking? I asked. There are options besides institutional care. Adult children moving in with elderly parents, or parents moving in with adult children. There are also senior communities that offer more independence than traditional nursing homes, but more support than what you have now. I looked out the hospital window at the parking lot 6 floors below. Cars coming and going, people going about their normal lives, while I lay in a hospital bed contemplating the end of mine. Let me think about it. Of course. But Dad, we need to make some decisions soon. You can't go back to the house the way things are. That night, alone in the hospital room, I did some serious thinking about what I wanted my life to look like. I was 73 years old, with mild dementia and a body that was starting to betray me in ways that couldn't be fixed with willpower and stubbornness. The house that had been my refuge and symbol of independence was becoming a liability. The basement stairs that had never bothered me before were now a hazard. The 2nd floor that I climbed every night to sleep in the bed I'd shared with Margaret for 41 years was becoming difficult to navigate safely. But giving up the house felt like giving up the last tangible connection to the life Margaret and I had built together. Every room held memories. Sarah's first steps in the living room, Christmas mornings around the tree by the front window, quiet evenings on the porch watching the neighborhood kids grow up. How do you walk away from 43 years of your life? The next morning, Maria visited during her lunch break, bringing flowers from my own garden and updates on the neighbors. "The house feels empty without you," she said. "Maria, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "Of course." "Do you think I can go back to living there safely?" She was quiet for a long time, looking out the window while she formulated her response. "Mr. Garrett,
I think you can go back if we make some changes. Bedroom on the first floor, safety modifications in the bathroom, maybe someone staying overnight a few nights a week. But honestly, it would be a lot of work and expense, and there would still be risks. And if I don't go back, then you find a new way to be happy. People do it all the time. That afternoon, Sarah brought photo albums from the house, pictures of our family vacations, holidays, milestones. We spent 2 hours going through them together, remembering stories I could still recall with perfect clarity, even though I couldn't remember what I'd had for lunch. "Dad, look at this one," Sarah said, pointing to a picture of me teaching her to ride a bicycle in our driveway. She couldn't have been more than 6, all skin knees and determination. "You were so stubborn," I remembered, refused to let me run along holding the seat. You wanted to do it yourself. Wonder where I got that from. We looked at each other and started laughing, the first real laughter I'd had since waking up in the hospital. "Sarah, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. About living arrangements? Yeah, I think maybe it's time to consider some alternatives." Her face showed relief mixed with sadness. "Are you sure?" "No, I'm not sure. But I'm scared of ending up back in here, or worse, because I was too stubborn to admit I need more help than Maria can provide." We spent the next week researching options. Sarah had done her homework, visiting facilities and communities throughout the region. She brought brochures and took notes, approaching the search with the same methodical thoroughness she'd inherited from me. "This one is interesting," she said, showing me information about a place called Heritage Village. It's not traditional assisted living. It's more like a small neighborhood of senior-friendly homes with support services available as needed. The brochure showed pictures of modest houses arranged around a central community center, with walking paths, gardens, and what looked like a normal neighborhood rather than an institution. You'd have your own place, smaller than the house, but private. There's a dining room if you don't want to cook, but also full kitchens if you do. Transportation to doctors, shopping, activities. And medical staff available 24 hours. What about Maria? Private caregivers are welcome. If you moved there, Maria could continue working with you if that's what you both wanted. The idea was appealing in a way I hadn't expected. My own space, but with built-in safety nets. Independence with backup systems. Community without institutional control. Can we visit it? Already arranged for Thursday morning. Heritage Village was better than the brochure had suggested. The houses were small but well-designed, with accessible features that didn't look medical or institutional. The community center had a library, a workshop space, a fitness room with equipment designed for older adults, and a dining room that looked more like a restaurant than a cafeteria. Our tour guide was Dorothy Chen, a woman in her 70s who'd lived at Heritage Village for 3 years. "I moved here after my husband died," she told us. "I was rattling around in a 4-bedroom house, terrified of falling down the stairs or having a medical emergency with no one around. Here, I have my independence, but I know help is available if I need it." "Do you miss your old house?" I asked. "Every day," she said honestly. "But I've made new memories here. I've made friends. I feel safe. At our age, that's worth something." The house we toured was a 2-bedroom, single-story cottage with a small kitchen, living room, and enclosed porch. It was about a quarter the size of my current house, but it was bright and clean and felt livable rather than institutional. "What do you think?" Sarah asked as we drove back to the hospital. "I think I need to see my house one more time before I make any decisions." The next day, Maria drove me home for what might be my last visit. Walking through the front door, I was struck by how big and empty the place felt. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a full basement, an attic filled with 40 years of accumulated possessions. It was too much house for one person with mobility issues and a declining memory. But it was my house, Margaret's house. The place where we'd raised our daughter and celebrated our anniversaries and argued about money and made love and grown old together. I walked through each room slowly, touching familiar objects, trying to memorize details I might forget. In the bedroom, I opened Margaret's jewelry box and listened to the tiny music box melody that still played after all these years. "What do you think, Maggie?" I asked her picture. "Am I giving up, or am I being smart?" But Margaret wasn't there to answer, and maybe that was answer enough. In the kitchen, I made one last cup of coffee in the machine we'd gotten for our anniversary. I sat at the table where I'd eaten breakfast every morning for 4 decades, looking out at the backyard where I'd taught Sarah to throw a baseball, and where Margaret had grown the tomatoes that won the county fair 3 years running. "Maria," I said finally, "I think it's time." "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm sure that staying here isn't safe anymore, and I'm sure that worrying Sarah to death isn't fair to her. Sometimes being a grown-up means making decisions you don't want to make." The transition to Heritage Village took 2 months. Sarah helped me sort through 43 years of possessions, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to give to family members. It was emotionally exhausting work, like dismantling the archive of my entire adult life one box at a time. Some decisions were easy. Margaret's clothes went to charity. Old tools went to Jake, who was starting to show an interest in building things. Other choices were harder. Did I need 40 years of tax returns? Margaret's recipe collection that I'd never use? The china we'd gotten for our wedding that we'd used maybe 6 times? "Keep what makes you happy," Sarah advised. "Everything else is just stuff." I kept the wedding china. I kept Margaret's jewelry box. I kept photo albums and a few pieces of furniture that would fit in the cottage. I kept my tools, even though there probably wouldn't be much use for them in my new life. Moving day was harder than I'd expected. Watching the moving truck pull away from the house where I'd been happy, where I'd been a husband and father and neighbor and functioning member of society, felt like watching my own funeral procession. But the cottage at Heritage Village was welcoming in its own way. Maria had helped arrange the furniture and hang pictures so that it felt as much like home a new place could. My chair from the living room fit perfectly by the window. Margaret's jewelry box sat on the dresser in the bedroom. The wedding china was displayed in the kitchen cabinet. "It's not the same," I told Sarah as we shared our first dinner in the new place. "No, it's not, but it's not terrible either, is it?" I looked around the small dining area, at the pictures on the walls, at Maria bustling around the kitchen like she'd been working there for years. "No, it's not terrible." 3 months after moving to Heritage Village, I had to admit that Sarah and Dr. Morrison had been right about the benefits of community living. When I had a minor stroke one Tuesday morning, help was available immediately. The medical staff had me stabilized and transported to the hospital within minutes of my calling for help. The stroke was what doctors call a warning shot. Minor damage with mostly recovered function, but a clear indication that more serious events were likely in the future. It left me with slightly slurred speech and some weakness on my left side, but I could still walk, still think, still recognize the people I loved. "Dad, you might not have survived this if you'd still been living alone in the house," Sarah told me during my hospital stay. "I know. I'm grateful for the help, even if I'm not grateful for needing it." That's the most mature thing you've ever said about this whole situation. Recovery from the stroke was slow but steady. Physical therapy helped with the weakness, and speech therapy helped with the articulation problems. But more importantly, I discovered that Heritage Village had resources I hadn't expected. There was a support group for residents dealing with cognitive decline, led by a social worker who specialized in dementia care. Sitting in a circle with 8 other people who were fighting the same battle I was, I felt less alone than I had in years. "The hardest part," said Robert, a retired accountant who'd been diagnosed with Alzheimer's 2 years earlier, "is feeling like you're becoming a different person. Like the person you used to be is disappearing a little bit every day." "But you're still you," countered Helen, whose husband had moved her to Heritage Village after she'd gotten lost driving to the grocery store 3 times in 1 week. The important parts are still there. You're still kind, still funny, still the person your family loves. Listening to their stories, I realized that my experience wasn't unique or shameful. Cognitive decline was something that happened to people, not something they did wrong or failed to prevent. It was a medical condition, not a moral failing. Maria continued working with me at Heritage Village, though her role evolved again as my needs changed. She helped me navigate the community resources, accompanied me to medical appointments, and provided the kind of personal continuity that institutional staff, however well-meaning, couldn't offer. Garrett, she said one morning while helping me organize my medications, I want you to know how proud I am of you. For what? For being brave enough to make the changes you needed to make. A lot of people in your situation just give up or fight everyone who tries to help them. You found a way to adapt. I had good help. You had people who cared about you, but you did the hard work yourself. On my 74th birthday, Sarah organized a party in Heritage Village's community room. My neighbors attended, along with a few old friends from the plant who made the drive to see me. Maria made my favorite cake, and Dorothy Chen played piano while we sang Happy Birthday. Looking around the room at the people who'd become my new community, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again: belonging. Not the deep-rooted belonging I'd had in my old neighborhood, but a different kind of connection, based on shared circumstances and mutual support. "Speech! Speech!" someone called out, and before I knew it, everyone was looking at me expectantly. I stood up slowly, using my walker for support, and looked at the faces around me, some familiar, some still new, all of them part of this chapter of my life I hadn't chosen, but was learning to embrace. 2 years ago, I began, my daughter tried to have me declared incompetent and force me into an old folks' home. Laughter rippled through the room. I fought her tooth and nail because I was terrified of losing my independence, my dignity, my home, everything that made me who I was. I thought accepting help meant giving up. I paused, looking at Sarah, who was sitting in the front row with tears in her eyes. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I was right about one thing. I wasn't ready to give up. I'm still not ready to give up. But I've learned that fighting for your independence doesn't mean fighting against everyone who wants to help you. Sometimes it means being smart enough to accept help so you can keep fighting. The applause was warm and genuine, and I sat down feeling like I'd said something true and important. Later, after the party wound down and most people had gone back to their cottages, Sarah and I sat on my small porch watching the sunset. "Dad, I need to apologize again." "For what this time?" "For not understanding what you were really afraid of. I thought you were just being stubborn about staying in the house. I didn't realize you were afraid of disappearing, of becoming someone you didn't recognize." "Have I? Disappeared, I mean?" She considered the question seriously. "You're different, slower, more cautious, less commanding, I guess. But you're still you. You're still the man who taught me to stand up for myself, who worked double shifts to pay for my college, who held my hand during my divorce. You're still my dad. Even with all this," I gestured vaguely at my walker, the Heritage Village campus around us, the reality of my diminished capabilities. "Especially with all this, the way you've handled these changes, the way you've adapted and found ways to keep living instead of just existing, it's made me proud to be your daughter." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching other residents take their evening walks along the paved paths, seeing families visit their elderly parents, observing the quiet rhythms of a community designed around the reality of aging. "Sarah," I said finally, "I want you to know that if the time comes when this isn't enough anymore, when I need more care than Heritage Village can provide, I'll go. I won't fight you." "Dad." "No, let me finish. I've learned that dignity isn't about where you live or how much help you need. It's about how you handle whatever situation you're in. If I have to go to a nursing home someday, I'll try to do it with grace. I hope that day never comes. It might, This stroke was a warning that bigger problems are probably coming. But I'm not afraid anymore, not the way I was before. I know that no matter what happens, I'll still be me. Changed, maybe diminished in some ways, but still Frank Garrett. As the sun set behind the Heritage Village Community Center, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Margaret would have loved, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced since her death. Not the peace of acceptance exactly, but the peace of understanding. Understanding that growing old with dignity doesn't mean staying the same. It means finding ways to remain yourself, even as everything around you changes. The next morning, Maria arrived at her usual time to find me sitting on the porch with my coffee, watching the sun come up over my new neighborhood. "Good morning, Mr. Garrett. You're up early." "Couldn't sleep. Too much thinking. About yesterday? About everything. About how we got here. Where we're going. Whether I made the right choices." "And what did you decide?" I smiled, feeling the morning sun warm my face. "I decided that maybe the choices don't matter as much as how you live with them." Maria sat down in the chair next to mine, something she would never have done in our first months together, but that felt natural now after 3 years of shared challenges and small victories. "Mr. Garrett, can I tell you something?" "Of course. When I first started working with you, I thought my job was to help you accept getting old. Now, I think my job is to help you remember that getting old doesn't mean you have to accept being less than who you are. Is there a difference? All the difference in the world." We sat together in the morning quiet, an elderly man with mild dementia and a woman who'd made a career of caring for people like him, watching Heritage Village come to life around us. Other residents emerged for their morning walks, staff members arrived for the day shift, delivery trucks brought supplies and necessities to keep our small community functioning.
It wasn't the life I'd planned, or the ending I'd imagined for my story, but it was my life, shaped by my choices and my willingness to keep adapting when adaptation seemed impossible. And for now, in this moment, with the sun warming my face and a friend sitting beside me, it was enough.